Hello, I'm Lana Newman Kruse, author of 3 books, and I'm welcoming you to We've Got Books, and lots of them. I want to introduce you to my esteemed colleagues and fellow authors, Anne Greene, author of 37 books, and James Yarbrough, author of 12 books and short stories. We are coming to you from the big sky country of Texas, near Dallas, Fort Worth, where the stars at night are big and bright deep in the heart of Texas, and where there's great football sometimes, and even better barbecue and Tex-Mex cuisine. Yum.
Hi, I'm Anne Greene.
Hello, I'm James Yarbrough.
We'll be your hosts for We've Got Books, and we're so excited to happily tackle some great Christian fiction in various genres. We have quite a variety of genres, something for everyone: historical, romance, romantic comedy, suspense, women's fiction, and full-blown comedy. We will also feature guest authors and their books. Have you ever read a sensational book and wondered about the person who wrote it? What made him or her tick? We'll sit around the table chatting to get to know each author and his novel and how the books move from a dream to a reality. So sit back and enjoy the ride into the literary world. Today we're going to do something different. We'll discuss our romantic comedy anthology. That's 3 books written by 3 different authors and put together into one book. Today's 3 books in one is Triple Trouble, 3 hilarious tales of love's almost lost. Each of us will take turns introducing each other and his or her book. And now let's begin with Jim Yarbrough interviewing Anne Greene about her novella, Tipsy in Love.
Hi, I'm Jim Yarbrough, and welcome, Anne Greene.
Thank you. So happy to be here.
Well, Anne, let's begin by learning a little about you. Could you tell us a bit about yourself?
I would be glad to. I live in Allen, Texas, a few miles north of Dallas. My hero husband is a retired colonel, Army Special Forces. Besides writing, I enjoy family, friends, and sharing adventures with my risk-taking husband. Whether writing contemporary or historical, my 37 books celebrate the abundant life Jesus gives. I've won numerous awards for my books, and I love writing about alpha heroes who aren't afraid to fall on their knees in prayer, and about gutsy heroines. I hope my stories transport you to awesome new worlds and touch your heart. My book, Angel with Steel Wings, spotlights women of World War II. Red is for Rookie blasts off with Holly Garden, private investigator's first case. Enjoy my award-winning Scottish historical romances, Masquerade Marriage and Marriage by Arrangement. And don't miss my CIA operative book, Shadow of the Dagger. My historical novel, Trail of Tears, the story of John Ross, will have you in tears. If you like shorter reads, don't miss my 31 novellas, 7 of which have won awards.
Thank you for that overview, Anne. You are certainly a prolific writer. I think it would be fun for listeners to learn how you got started.
Yeah, it was a fun way to start, too. I attended the Write to Publish conference in Chicago with 3 chapters of my first attempt at writing a book. At the end of the 2-week conference, each writer got an interview with the editor of Moody Press. I was so new at writing, I wasn't even sure why I needed an interview with the editor, but I went. He loved my book concept and asked me how long it would take me to write the book. I didn't have a clue. He asked me if I could deliver the book to him in 9 months. I smiled and said, yes, and went home and went to work. I did have the book ready in time, and Moody Press did publish my first book, Trail of Tears. I took this as God's blessing that He wanted me to write.
That's a great story, Anne. It's always very interesting to hear how a successful career began and flourished. Now, would you tell us a bit about your contribution to this anthology? And your title is Tipsy in Love.
I loved writing Tipsy in Love. I am so much in love with both zany characters. I'll tell you a little bit about it. Charm Clearbell hatched a plan to leave her Tampa apartment to chase her boyfriend, eminent plastic surgeon Harry Bear, to Scotland during leap year in order to propose. She arrives during the storm of the century, and her plane is rerouted from Inverness to Aberdeen. During a series of ridiculously impossible events, she meets Rick McDougall. Helicopter rescue pilot Rick falls immediately, impossibly, irresistibly in love with Charm. He has 2 days to follow her around Scotland to talk her out of her plan to propose to her boyfriend and to show her his love. Meanwhile, the stunning Kathleen traps Rick in her own matrimonial web. This hilarious romp will have you laughing all the way to the final proposal.
Charm, Clarabelle, and Harry Bear. Okay, you're having fun already there, Anne. Very good. Enthralling glimpse into your book. Thank you. What inspired you to write this novella? And how does it complement or connect with the other 2 novellas in Triple Trouble?
We 3, you, Jim, Lana, and I, decided to write a humorous anthology. We chose a place, Tampa, Florida, for the books to begin and end. We chose a mythical restaurant, Our Place by the Sea, which had a legendary reputation. The legend goes, when you meet a man for the first time at this restaurant, you will fall in love, get married, and live happily ever after. The restaurant waiter said that myth definitely applied to Charm, as she had 2 marriage proposals enthroned at the same table by 2 different men, less than an hour apart. I cannot tell you which groom she chose, but you will be surprised.
And were there some personal experiences that you've had or influences that shaped your story? And if so, what were they?
Yes. After visiting Scotland, I fell in love with the land and the Scottish people. Also, the leap year legend originated somewhere in that vicinity, along with the tradition that in 1828, Scottish Queen Margaret introduced a law allowing women to propose during leap year. She also penalized men who refused a leap year proposal. And as well, I had just returned from living 2 years in beautiful Tampa, Florida. So restaurants and waterfronts were fresh in my mind.
And would you mind reading a brief excerpt from your romantic comedy, Tipsy in Love?
I will, Jim, if you'll help me with the part of the hero. Well, since I love to read about when the hero and heroine meet, so here is how Charm and Rick met. I've shortened the meeting a bit. Charm pushed against the old-fashioned door latch. The door swung open so easily, she fell onto the wooden floor. A tomb-like silence replaced the music and voices. She blinked against the bright light and struggled up from her knees. Sure enough, a sign above a long wooden bar read, Fraserburg Diner. This was no ordinary step back into time. The walls were decorated with baited fishing hooks and items for curing, salting, and drying fish, and other implements of torture. Not exactly a place inviting a tourist. Hello?
Sounds American. That brogue drifted from one of the 4 men seated at the bar, each staring over his shoulder at her. Could they gawk any more?
A giggle burbled up. 4 stooges. 1 bald, 1 fat, 1 skinny, and 1 grinning like a jack-o'-lantern. But all friendly looking.
Drowned rat, more like. The voice came from behind the bar. Do all Americans stow their shoes in their coats? The barkeep's tone was belligerent. At your service, miss.
Oh, The man was a piece of work. She unbuttoned her soaking raincoat and swung it over the nearest chair. That came from behind the bar. The bald man lounging in the first seat at the bar swung around to face her, his back to the barkeep. Now, Angus Broderick McDougall, is that the way we Scots treat a lady?
Do you see what she's done to my clean floor? A sarcastic voice belonged to the Scot behind the bar. Look at her standing there dripping.
Sure, and Angus, the lady's dress be wet enough to show her femininity. But a gentleman wouldn't make no mention of such. Charm glanced down, then snatched up her raincoat and wrapped the dripping thing around her body. Mr. McDougall, you are no gentleman.
Right you are. McDougall swung around to face away, but made no attempt to hide the grin that spread over his face. He reached down behind the bar and came up with an armful of large brown towels.
Charm flipped her hair out of her eyes. McDougall was fairly tall and medium built, dressed in nondescript pants, a worn gray sweater. His unwelcome attitude exasperated her to her last nerve, giving her voice the chill of the outside storm. Thank you. If you gentlemen would be so kind enough to turn your backs, I'll wrap myself in these towels. So the night went, but in the morning Charm got a second look. Angus strode into the dining room, his boots clomping on the floor like rowdy children. Charm sucked in her breath. A shaft of light spotlighted Angus, transforming his brown hair blonde, his stormy eyes sunny, and his last night's grumpy expression into a striking visage like a bold Viking or a medieval knight. How had she missed recognizing that the man was fairly good-looking in a rugged way, if you like a strong jaw on a man? Angus still wore last night's shapeless clothes, and his mass of hair almost stood on end. Perhaps that hair gave him the wild, untamed look so many women loved.
Angus scowled. I can take you to Inverness. That was lots of fun, Anne. I almost felt like we were in Brigadoon for a second. Thank you. Let's end with this. What message do you want readers to take from this book?
My overriding theme is, no matter the situation, God is in control. Nothing is impossible with God.
And that was a great and inspiring answer. Thank you. Thank you also for your enlightening responses and information. Everyone will want to read Anne Greene's book, Tipsy in Love. Now let's hand the microphone back to Anne as the interviewer for Lana Newman Kruse about Lana's new book, also featured in this entertaining anthology. The anthology again, Triple Trouble, 3 hilarious tales of love almost lost. Now here are Anne and Lana.
Hi, it's Anne Greene here again. I'll be interviewing Lana about her romantic comedy, Just Call Me Scrumptious. But Lana, first tell us about yourself.
First, thank you for having me. Well, I'm the only native Texan here and have lived in San Antonio, Austin, and now McKinney, north of Dallas. My husband David and I took a delightful sojourn to California for 21 amazing years, but moved back to Texas 15 years ago and now live close to our 2 children and 6 grandchildren who range in age from 21 down to 9. Those grands keep us young but tired.
I know that feeling. And the blessing. Lana, how did you get started writing?
I loved writing and words as far back as I can remember. My mother and I played word games together and wrote poems. Fast forward to about 10 years ago, I was in a Christian book club when Anne Greene was our guest author. Remember, Anne? I enjoyed your book, Masquerade Marriage, and I enjoyed your style of writing. We later went to lunch together, and she not only answered all my questions about writing, she invited me to a local writers' conference where I learned even more about the craft of writing. Then Anne felt the call from the Lord to start a critique group and asked me to join. I was hooked, delighted, and overwhelmed. James Yarbrough later joined this group, and both Anne and Jim have been instrumental in my growth as a writer. I advise anyone who wants to write to join a good critique group where they tell you the truth about your writing, the good, the bad, and the cattywampus. Such help is invaluable. Thank you, Anne and Jim.
You are so right about critique groups. I think writers really need them. And I'm glad we could help, Lana. How about giving us a summary of your romantic comedy, Just Call Me Scrumptious, and how you came up with your delightful title?
Happy to, thank you. It's about when beautiful redhead Mary Christmas, yep, her real name, meets her ideal man, Rob Madison, at her favorite Tampa restaurant, and her heart dances momentarily. Quickly she decides his masculine masterpiece can't be as perfect as he seems, but this is the restaurant touting the romantic legend promising marriage when a couple meets there. Just a legend, right? Maybe not. And then about the title. Anne and Jim were agonizing with me over a snappy title when boom, Anne popped up with Just Call Me Scrumptious, and Jim added flair, and the title was born.
Well, I know it's a great story and memorable and a catchy title. What inspired this book, and how does it complement the other two books in our anthology?
Well, Anne, Jim, and I were discussing our writing this anthology. It was decided it would be three romantic comedies. The location, Tampa, Florida, was decided upon. Then a restaurant's legend promising marriage when a couple met there. Jim named the restaurant Our Place by the Sea. We all loved it. While all three stories had these things in common, everything else would be different. My book complements the others with romance, humor, and amusing antics performed by the characters, like Anne and Jim's books do, but mine features characters who are over 40 and widowed. I like to encourage my readers that happiness is open to all, regardless of age and various circumstances.
Good idea, Lana. What particular circumstances forged this idea?
I've known couples of various ages who were widowed. Some were advised to remarry and others were not. I want people to know if they want to find love again, it is possible. So don't let someone else make the decision for you. People of all ages have remarried quite happily. I know a couple in their mid to late 70s who remarried thinking they only had a few years, but the Lord gave them over 20 of a strong, loving marriage, with the woman living to be in her late 90s and the man to 100. Follow your heart with prayer. My grandmother used to say, "Don't forget the old people." She wasn't referring to marriage, but I want to remember older people in all ways and to honor my grandmother in doing so.
I appreciate you thinking about people finding happiness throughout their lives, even into older age. Lana, tell us why you include several age groups in your books, including a couple in their 80s and 90s.
Happy to. I like to include several generations because all groups have something special to contribute. In our real lives, if we're blessed, we live with all ages. Children add spark and adorability, teens perpetuate energy and keen expectation, young adults embody hard work and wonder for their future, older adults add some calm and knowledge, and finally, the oldest generation offer advice and experience for what's important and what really isn't. I love what Thomas Edison said: when you've exhausted all possibilities, remember this: you haven't. Older people have experienced this. They've worked beyond all traces of stamina and seen firsthand the impossible come to fruition. And they want to tell the other generations what they know from experience, not what they've read about necessarily, but what they've lived. And the younger people need to hear this because older people usually speak their minds without holding back. You know, when we get old, we say what we think. They can be both entertaining and good teachers about life. Frank Lloyd Wright said, "The longer I live, the more beautiful life becomes." All ages benefit from seeing this beautiful life, not always easy, but still wonderful, a wonderful life lived out. This gives everyone something to look forward to. And just call me scrumptious. I have a middle-aged couple, Merry Christmas and Scrumptious Rob, an elderly couple, and Hildy and her love interest Archie, active, enjoying life, finding love, spending time with family, and loving God. Hildy even recounts humorous tidbits about their klepto aunts, Bert and Ernie, lovable, harmless women. Yes, Bert and Ernie are women. Most families have some questionable members who add zaniness to the family tree, and our story does too.
And you must have a lot of zany family members. Makes your story really interesting. They add humor too. Lana, what do you want your readers to take from this book?
My message is everyone is valuable, and that Christians have many of the same hopes, dreams, and experiences, and those experiences may be happy or sad as everyone else. Very importantly, they have the Lord to depend upon always and to help them when times get tough.
Thank you so much for enlightening us about your book, containing many facets of life, while being thoroughly entertaining. Now, I'll pass the microphone back for your interview of our colleague and co-author, James Yarbrough.
Hi, it's Lana again here. Thank you for having me for my interview, and now it's my pleasure to interview Jim Yarbrough and hear about the third book in our anthology, When Least Expected. Welcome to you, Jim.
Thanks, Lana. Thanks for having me.
Okay, Jim, and I will call you Jim even though you go by James most of the time. You've said you're not a natural romance writer and you are more comfortable injecting comedy into romance plots. Is that right?
Well, that's absolutely correct, Lana. I am not really a natural romance writer. I have to leaven romance with a big dollop of humor. In fact, it was only after my critique group partners, one Lana Newman Kruse and one Anne Greene, encouraged me to write a romantic comedy that I did so. Thank you, ladies. The comedy part I was drawn to, the romance part, not so much. But let me just add, a funny thing happened once I got to writing romantic comedy. I really liked it.
So, Jim, do you think comedy is a natural part of a romance story?
Oh, I absolutely do. Maybe people don't automatically think comedy when they think of romance, but life being what it is, I think everyone understands how romance can be hilarious. For example, I've heard it said that a man and a woman are typically so nervous that they each bring a stranger to their first few dates, that is, themselves. So it's not just that they are on their best behavior, they are unrecognizable to others who really know them. That situation is a stupendous foundation for humor right there.
And you did a great job of using that foundation. Is there another attraction to you in writing romantic comedy?
Yes, I also like the subject breadth that romantic comedy gives the writer. And what I mean by that is almost everyone is fascinated by the interaction between women and men. And there's just no shortage of material, and I'm talking clean material, on that particular subject, right? In fact, romantic comedy is a great combination of earnestness versus awkwardness. After all, this is women and men we're talking about, Venus versus Mars. In the romance part of romantic comedy, there's earnestness, energy, mystery, timelessness, longing, heavy stuff. But in the comedy part of romantic comedy, there's also this awkwardness, nervousness, and misunderstanding, unjustified assumptions, unintended messages, and miscommunication. Stuff that can produce very funny outcomes. So here's what I think a romantic comedy is: it's a series of intense klutzinesses. And that's how my romantic comedies turn out, really. So if you like an intense and funny klutziness vibe, read When Least Expected. That was a pretty cheap plug for my book before you asked, wasn't it?
Well, I didn't want to say so, Jim. Did you invent a new word, klutzinesses? That's a great one. Yes, you got ahead of me. So let's give me some details about your romantic comedy When Least Expected. which is part of Triple Trouble.
Yes, I will. Thank you, Lana. When least expected, I have to say, I had a lot of fun writing this one, and I really enjoyed doing the anthology with both you and Anne as well. Part of the fun was how we three cooperated to write the anthology, Triple Trouble. We agreed up front on some commonalities in each story. At least part of the setting would be Tampa, Florida, and each story somehow had to involve the same restaurant, Our Place by the Sea. Beyond that, some books are easier to write than others, and this one was just fun to write. This is a story about somehow boy, however unlikely, meets girl, and all the confusion that ensues, the up and down stuff that happens after they meet. The main characters are a guy who's a veteran and an older law student, Frank, and a young lady who's a professional librarian and birdwatching hobbyist, Jennifer. Birdwatching, I did say birdwatching. They're both a bit gun-shy on relationships because of past experiences, but they're solid, hard-working, and faithful people. Frank and Jennifer live in the mishmash of the real world in Tampa, and they both happen to have unique, quasi-crazy musician roommates. Foozy is Frank's roommate, that's Foozy, right? And Phyllis is Jennifer's roomie. Thank God for two solid, well put together, and dependable Christian people. Of course, Frank and Jennifer create a lot of comedy themselves, but in order to infuse the story with the kind of zaniness I wanted, I had to add Foozy and Phyllis. I had particular fun with these latter two characters because while they're solid believers, Foozy and Phyllis are also fun-loving, laid-back, quirky, and urban cool. These two come at life from a different angle. So anyway, no need for spoiler alerts, but the plot involves tracking these four folks through their lives for a year or so. Dates, rivals, suitors, eye-opening school and job pressures, misunderstandings, conflicts, breakups, reunions, breakup repeats, and so on. And oh yes, the plot turns on one big secret, and wild horses won't drag the secret out of me, so you must read the book. Will Frank and Jennifer actually become a couple? What happens to Phyllis? And what happens to Foozy? One last point. I injected an animal prop into the story in the form of Phyllis's very ancient gray parrot, Mr. Peepers. Mr. Peepers talks incessantly and is hilariously wise beyond his species. So you must read When Least Expected to learn what happens to Mr. Peepers, too.
And I also love your phrase, beyond his species. That describes perfectly that crazy parrot. Loved him. Final question, Jim. Where can people find When Least Expected and the three-story romantic comedy Triple Trouble?
Yes, well, you can find When Least Expected and Triple Trouble, the entire anthology, at Amazon Books. In fact, if you search on Amazon Books, James Yarbrough, you'll find all my books in one place. And check out my website, www.jamesyarbroughauthor.com. Yarbrough is spelled Yarbrough. My books are there as well, along with some personal background and a sign-up for my free periodic newsletter.
Thank you, Lana and James, for a great interview. Well, that wraps up our whirlwind tour of the romantic comedy anthology, Triple Trouble. I hope you're enthused to the point you will rush to your nearest mouse and click on Amazon Books to order it. That's all the time we have today, and we're so glad you joined us. We'd love to hear from you, our listeners. We love your input about our podcast, and we'll listen to your suggestions of authors you'd like to hear from. You can email us at we'vegottbooks33@gmail.com. That's WEVEGOTBOOKS 33@gmail.com. You can find the anthology Triple Trouble and all three individual stories we've discussed today on Amazon. Look up the author's name, Anne Greene, Lana Newman Kruse, and James Yarbrough, for links to Triple Trouble and all their individual books. On our next broadcast of We've Got Books, we'll interview Colleen Snyder. Colleen writes books and novellas in a style described as contemporary suspense with a touch of romance. So you'll certainly want to hear that interview. And until our next time together, thank you and happy reading.